Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my new video. This is part two video today, and I'm going to reserve part two videos and videos on the new channel for high IQ discussions. So, in today's high IQ discussion, we're going to talk about China's new GPU that they've released, and a deep topic I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to be talking about how they teach British schools and schools around the world, but mainly British schools, why they teach them Animal Farm. And those of you who know Animal Farm, basically it talks about communism in a bad way. It says how bad communism is, and this is how they brainwash British kids to hate communism. And I was part of those kids when they used to teach this in school. And the way to brainwash kids, they call it Animal Farm because instead of having people, they used farm animals to basically brainwash kids because kids respond to animals and things better than humans. And this is how they brainwash kids from a young age to hate communism, hate China, hate Russia, hate any country that's communist, basically. And they are still doing it today. They're still doing it today because they've done it to my daughter, guys. They've done it. They've completely brainwashed her, and I will tell you the full story. But let's talk about this GPU first, and then we'll go on to Animal Farm discussion. So China's released a new gaming GPU to challenge Nvidia. So Nvidia has had a real major rise over the last few years, mainly because they've had a very good gaming GPU. Also, AI came along, and they were one of the first companies to release an AI chip, and things went up from there for Nvidia, and they've pretty much had a monopoly of gaming GPUs. Obviously, there are other gaming GPUs, but Nvidia was considered the best. There's obviously the AMD Radeon and many other um, you know GPUs that were competing with Nvidia, but Nvidia was still the best. And when the AI came out, and that's when the company really uh, shot up. Everybody and anybody wanted to buy Nvidia products, so they pretty much had a monopoly, guys. There was hardly any other companies like Nvidia who could touch them when it came to gaming and AI. But now China has come along, and this is really scaring Nvidia because Nvidia, I made a video a couple of days ago about Nvidia losing the Chinese market. Not only have they lost the Chinese market, but competitors are now coming out of China who will compete with Nvidia, just like this GPU um, that's come out to compete with Nvidia. So Nvidia had a monopoly in the market. They've literally had no major competitors apart from AMD and I think one, two others, but they pretty much had a monopoly, guys. Now China's coming out with GPUs much cheaper and potentially much faster. So this GPU, although it's not as fast as the latest Nvidia GPUs, the whole point is China can make them locally. And that is what's going to scare Nvidia, because I don't know if you guys remember when they interviewed Elon Musk a few years ago. They mentioned BYD to Elon Musk, and Elon Musk started laughing. And they said, "Do you not see them as a competitor?" He was just laughing his head off. He said, "No, no, BYD are not a competitor. Have you seen their cars? They're awful." Those are the words he was using. He was really looking down on BYD. And then a few years later, now BYD is now selling more cars than Tesla. The BYD cars are technically better than Tesla's. The BYD cars, the company itself is growing faster and faster than Tesla. Now he's not laughing anymore. He's actually crying. So it's the same with these GPUs. They might not be as fast as Nvidia now, but give it time. Give it like a year or 2 years or 3 years, and you will see these Chinese GPUs much much faster than Nvidia's. Nvidia might be laughing at them now, thinking, "Oh, they're not. These GPUs are not much of a threat to us." Well, wait a year, wait 2 years, see what happens. This is exactly the same reaction Elon Musk did when they mentioned BYD to him. So the point is, China can develop these chips locally without Western help, without Western products, without Western companies, supply chains. They can do it themselves. And if they can do it themselves, they can improve on this product. They can come out with new versions or new versions of the GPU, faster versions, faster technology. And that's the point. Once you release the first iteration, the second, third, fourth, fifth iterations are much easier because all you're doing is improving on that product. So the same way with Chinese EV cars when they first came out. You know, with every version, every car, they would improve on it. And plus, with all the competition that China had, now you see Chinese cars are probably the best in the world. Technically, they are way ahead of any other, EV cars in the world. Better than European cars and, Volkswagen and all these other cars. And, that's because China did it locally and they've improved on it. Every single few months, they've improved on it. They improved the software. They improved everything on it every single year. Every new model had a new improvement. And this is exactly what's going to happen with these GPUs. So China's already making very good games. I don't know if you guys are gamers, but there was Black Wukong. I don't know if you heard of that game, that Monkey God game, and that had rave reviews. And there's also another game coming out called I think it's called the Blade or something. Uh, some fighting game with blades, blazing blade. I can't remember the name for it, guys, but it looks amazing when it comes out. And that's another. Chinese games are really, really looking good, better than Western counterparts actually. And they're not woke as well, because the Western games are very woke nowadays. But China is avoiding all that woke nonsense. So one of the reasons that China has not been coming out with their own gaming console, because China can pretty much do everything, but the only thing they haven't done in terms of gaming is a gaming console. They don't have anything similar to PS5 or Xbox. Why is that, you might say? Why doesn't China create one? Well, one of the reasons they cannot create one is because, you know, because of this gaming GPU they could not make. That was one of the major hurdles. So now with this gaming GPUs, they can create amazing graphics, and they don't have to import NVIDIA GPUs. They don't have to import Western GPUs because what's going to happen is if China if China did release a gaming console similar to PlayStation, you can guarantee the Western companies will sanction them. They'll put them in the entity list. That's what they do. They don't want any source of competition. They don't want anything competing with Xbox or PlayStation, so they will sanction them. So this is why China was waiting to make its own GPUs. So now that China can make its own GPUs, they can pretty much the next step is to make their own chips because to compete with PS5 and latest Xbox, you need a really really good chip, a fastest chip. So once China can create those chips as well as TSMC and Intel and Samsung and stuff like that, 5 nanometers, 3 nanometers. Once China can do that, then you will see China bringing out their own consoles with the latest chips, latest GPUs. So they're almost there, guys. They're almost there. Just a few more steps left, and they'll have their own kind of consoles ready. So let's talk about some deep subjects now. Let's talk about Animal Farm. So throughout history, guys, especially if you live in the West, they make you scared of communism. When you're a child, you're basically taught in schools, and you're forced to read this book. I was forced to read this book as a child when I was 10, 11, maybe even 12, and they also do some exams on it as well. So you are forced to read it as part of the curriculum, and I'll prove it to you. So you can see here. Um, you can see what it says here. Animal Farm is one of the most famous political satires ever written. Almost every British school child reads it. Can you see this? Almost every British school child reads it. I will increase the wordings because I know some of you can't see the full writing. But you can see here, almost every British school child reads it. It's usually far too early to grasp all the meanings. Almost 10 million copies have been sold in English language versions alone. It's been translated to 22 foreign languages and written against Stalinism and what Orwell saw as the betrayal of revolutionary principles by the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. But he also talks about China as well. And obviously it's written by Orwell. And British people think Orwell is some god. I don't think he's some god. Yeah, I mean, look, he only wrote one book which I really like, which was 1984. Everything else he wrote was BS, guys. Was absolute BS, including Animal Farm. And I think he was basically hired by certain groups of people to write books about scaring people, with communism. So throughout, my life and everyone's life in UK, people are basically brainwashed into being scared of communism because they know the capitalist system is corrupt. There's room for heavy corruption in capitalism. When you have a system that's completely capitalist, you only have a few people at the top in power making all the money, and everyone else basically lives in poverty. This is what capitalism has become. And because they don't want people to complain, they basically brainwash kids into thinking communism is the worst system. And they brainwash kids so they can get away with it. They can get away with the capitalism crimes that they do. And this is why, throughout centuries, decades, throughout history, you only have a few people making all the money, and everyone else basically are like slaves. It's been like that throughout history, guys. You can go all the way back to the medieval times when you had British kings. They were basically making all the money. All the royal families were making all the money, and everyone else in Britain were just paupers or beggars. Even in the height of the British Empire, when they were taking over half of the world, there was a lot of beggars in UK. There was a lot of poverty because the ones who were making all the money, they kept the money for themselves. They don't want another system that looks after the people. They don't want that. And if the people realize there are better systems out there, these capitalists, these oligarchs will lose their power, and they don't want that. So one way they keep their power is to brainwash kids into thinking communism is is evil. The Soviet Union fell. You know, it didn't fall because of communism. It fell because I believe the Soviet Union was they were overstretching themselves with all these military adventures. They were in Afghanistan for like 20 years. They were obviously, you know, doing they were expanding the empire, and they was overstretching themselves, and also they didn't really build an economy which was outside of oil and gas. I think I think the Soviets made a lot of mistakes. I'm not here to you know justify what the Soviets did and stuff. Some of the stuff they did was very evil, but I'm saying that it wasn't because of communism. I think the Soviets collapsed because they made a lot of mistakes, and the leaders made a lot of mistakes. And I think the biggest mistake was focusing on oil. Their economy was based on oil. They just put everything on oil. Their industry was running on oil. Their main exports was oil. And the reason the Soviet Union collapsed is because the oil prices went all the way down. And why did the oil price go down? Because the Americans found a way to extract oil from America using fracking. So once America, they found how to do fracking, they started pushing out, oil to the outside world. And also the Middle Eastern countries, they started pumping more oil to the outside world as well. So here's some proof that what I'm saying. You can see that the Soviet Union oil prices plummeted from $100 per barrel in 1980 to roughly $24 per barrel by 1986, instantly evaporating the USSR's export profits. Domestic production drops, falling global prices made the drilling less profitable, causing the Soviet domestic oil production to stall that eventually declined by the late 1980s. The final straw, this loss of revenue bankrupted the state, depleting official reserves and making it impossible for import basic consumer goods and pay. So you see, guys, it wasn't communism didn't fail in the Soviet Union because of the communism. It failed because of bad management, bad economy, and oil. Oil was the main reason. There were obviously other reasons as well. There were other reasons. I'm not just saying oil was the main reason, but oil is a huge reason why the Soviet collapsed. And it just comes down to really bad really bad management of your economy, bad overstretching yourself as well. They were overstretching themselves. They were in Afghanistan for 20 years, like I said. They were in all these other Soviet states. They were also, they were basically taking over half of Germany as well. So they were really overstretching themselves, guys. And and then the book also talks about China as well. And I remember, growing up, and they were telling me all these evil stories about China as well. They were saying that, oh, Mao killed millions of people. They teach you that in schools, guys. I'm not joking. So all these kids were, growing up, they're scared of communism. They're scared of, China. They're scared of the Soviet Union. And they really make you scared. They really say, oh, we're gonna, the Soviet Union could nuke us at any point. And in UK we had a show called Fu Manchu. So those of you who remember the show, used to be about, you know, basically used to be about this evil Chinese guy who wants to take over the world. Take over the world with his communism and stuff. And they used to really scare people in UK. And they made loads of these films, Fu Manchu films. and they made the daughter of Fu Manchu, the revenge of Fu Manchu, Fu Manchu strikes again, Fu Manchu rises again. All of these, Fu Manchu movies, and they were just there to scare the British people of China. But I'll tell you one truth, guys. One truth that a lot of British people get brainwashed very easily. Mao did not kill his own people. That is a lie made by the Western media. And how do I know it's a lie? Because this is what the Western media does. They lie, and they and you can see what they're doing around the world at the moment. So let me show you one particular lie. Let me show you this lie here. So Trump basically says that 4 or 5 snipers in Iran, this is in Iran by the way, killed 42,000 Iranian protesters. 4 or 5 snipers. Can you believe this shit? Can you believe these ridiculous lies that's coming out of the West? And you might say to yourself, oh, it's only Trump. Trump always lies. No, guys. No. If you go to any mainstream Western paper, whether it's American paper or the British paper, they will say the same thing. They will say that Iran killed 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 protesters. They all say it. All of the Western papers. I can give you a big list of all the headlines of all the papers that were coming out with this story, and the list will be endless, guys. Absolutely endless, because they all run with it. So these are the stories and lies that these British, British companies and British press companies, presidents of the United States come out with. I mean, can you believe this lie that 4 or 5 snipers kill 42,000? Does he even understand what the snipers do? Snipers can can fire one bullet at a time. So they're going to have to target somebody, shoot, shoot with one bullet, then they're going to have to reload, and the sniper is not going to carry with him 20,000 rounds of rifle bullets. No sniper is going to carry that much. Sniper is for killing one person or an important target. It's not for mass killing, mass shooting. And when you kill one person, they're all going to start running away. All the protesters are going to run in different directions. How are those 4 or 5 snipers going to kill all of them? It makes no sense. These are the lies that Trump and Western papers go along with, and the stupid people believe it. The stupid people believe it, and this is not just Iran. Throughout history, they lie about everything. Any country they have, they don't like, they lie about it. So, for example, they lied about Syria. They said that Assad basically used chemical weapons against his own people. Lie. They lied about Saddam, about weapons of mass destruction. Another lie. They lied about Gaddafi. They said that soldiers in Libya were taking Viagra and they were doing mass rapes. Another lie. That's what they do, guys. They lie about these countries, and people believe it. So they obviously lied about China, because this is what's happening right now. They are blockading Cuba right now. They're blockading Cuba. There's no food going into Cuba. There's no electricity. There's no oil going into Cuba. People in Cuba are starving. People in Cuba are dying because they don't have the medicine. Everything's been blockaded. And the American press is blaming the Cubans for it. They're blaming communism. They said that communism is killing people in Cuba. When it's not. It's not communism. It's them blocking, doing the blockade. And then in the history books, they're going to write down, oh look, Cuba, they killed millions of people, They killed millions of people, and it's mainly because of communism. And the leader killed millions of his own people because of communism. That's what they're going to say in the history books. They're not going to talk about the blockade. They're not going to talk about how they stop all the food and energy and medicine going into Cuba. And this is exactly what they're doing in Gaza. What they've been doing in Gaza. They've been blockading food. People in Gaza have, the Palestinian people in Gaza, they have no food, no electricity, nothing, no shelter. People are dying. There's no medicine. And who they're going to blame? They're going to blame Hamas. They're going to say Hamas killed them. That's what they do, guys. They do these mass killings, and they blame the leaders for it, or they blame communism for it. They obviously blamed Mao for all these people dying in famine in China, but it's not. When you look at the details, you know, as soon as the CPC came into power, the Western countries placed sanctions on China because the Western countries were friends with the Kuomintang party. Chiang Kai-shek was a friend of the West, and the Western countries did not like the CPC taking over the rest of China. And they obviously didn't like Mao, so what they did was they sanctioned China. And when they sanctioned China, China could not buy any food. If China has got a huge population, they need food. They have to import a lot of food. And they couldn't do it from these Western countries basically blocked it. And so many people died. And in the history books, they blame Mao for it. When it wasn't Mao's fault, it was the Western countries who placed the sanctions. And this is why China does not like sanctions on countries. They do not like it. They even lied about Tiananmen Square. Nobody died in Tiananmen Square. They just make up numbers. They make up lies. If Trump was alive today, if Trump was president during Tiananmen Square, he would have made up all sorts of lies. He would have said, "Oh, 5 Chinese snipers killed 100,000 Chinese or something." He will make up some ridiculous numbers. That's what they do, guys. Do not believe Western propaganda. I mean, I grew up with Western propaganda all my life. And it wasn't until I actually visited China that it opened my eyes. The first time I visited was 20 years ago. And then I visited again 10 years ago. And time is due for me to do another visit. And this time for good, I think. But yeah, it really opens your eyes when you go to China. Really, you realize that everything you've been told was a lie. And I think it opens up a lot of Western people's minds when they go to China. And they realize, all their lives they've just been propagandized. So yeah, that's the high IQ discussion for today, guys. I'd love to see your thoughts. And do you still think capitalism is a better system than communism? I mean, look at communism today. I mean, the Western people, right? They can scream and hate on communism all day long. But look at China. Look at China's system. All these haters of communism, when they look at China's system, they get absolutely jealous and they start making excuses. They said, "Oh, China's not communist. China's capitalist." Well, and I have to I have to always correct them. I said, "No, China is not capitalist. China's system is a socialism with Chinese characteristics. They have raised 800 million people out of extreme poverty. All of the things they do is to benefit people. They don't let corporations take over government decisions. They don't let corporations become too big for their boots. All the public services are owned by China. They don't sell their public services. The public services are for the people. For example, water, electricity, all the public services, that should be owned by the people. They shouldn't be selling it to private companies, because when you sell public services to private companies, they only look for profit. Like in Britain, they sold off the water to private companies, and the water and the sewage is awful, guys, because all the money they make goes to their shareholders. They don't put any money into, improving anything. They dump sewage in the beaches in the UK. It's absolutely disgusting, guys. This is why, people don't understand the difference between communism and capitalism. And I said to them, look, Mao was the first leader who set the foundations for what China is today. What you see in China today was set in foundation from the Mao times. So that was, a communist system, and it developed over time, because communism is not set. It can be developed. It can be, you can, you can improve on it. You can improve on the system. It's not set in stone. That's why they call it Chinese characteristics, because China has developed the system into a real working, you know, product that benefits everyone. And that's what people don't seem to understand. And that's what Orwell didn't understand in Animal Farm. He basically assumed communism is black and white. Like, he didn't foresee that you can actually change you can actually develop the system and make it better. It's flexible, basically. He didn't understand that. Everything can be flexible, because at the end of the day we are human beings. We always want to improve on what we have. Nothing's set in stone. If we're human beings, we want to improve something in ourselves, we will do it. If you're a woman, you want to, sometimes women do plastic surgeries to make themselves look better. Men sometimes, you know, for them to be better, they get, they learn a new skill and they make more money. You know, or if you're a company, then you will, basically start a new product, develop that product, improve that product. We're human beings. We improve every single day. Same with communism. It can be improved. It can be flexible. And that's what Orwell back in the day didn't understand. He thought communism was just black and white. It's a failed system. That's what he assumed. So let me know your thoughts, guys. What do you think? Let's have some high IQ discussions on the comment section. And if you're a fan of capitalism, you hate communism, we welcome you to put your comments into the comment section and have a discussion with us. And looking forward to it. All right, guys, that's it for today. I'll see you soon. Take care for now.